This Notre Dame team is extremely talented. You have Tyler Buckner, who is expected to be the starting quarterback this season for the Fighting Irish. I think that he is probably the most talented quarterback that Notre Dame has had under center and over the last decade. Good athlete with a live arm. And he's going to be throwing the ball behind one of the best offensive lines in all of college football. Tyree is most likely going to be the RB1 in this offense this season. This is somebody who hasn't gotten a extremely large workload over the last couple of years, but he has done pretty good when his number has been called. The wide receiver position probably is going to be everybody's main concern. Notre Dame hasn't really gotten great wide receiver play over the last couple of years. However, this probably is one of the better wide receiver groups that Notre Dame has had in recent memory. You have Avery Davis entering his sixth season with the program. Before he suffered that season-ending ACL injury last year, he was having a pretty productive season for Notre Dame. He had 27 receptions, 386 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns. He's going to be fully healthy this year. You have Lorenzo Style. And also you have Jaden Thomas, who has pretty much been the talk of Notre Dame fans coming out of spring camp. This is somebody who was highly touted coming out of that 2021 recruiting cycle. He was a 4-star recruit. He's 6'1", 215 pounds. He has a good frame, really physical in the run game and in the passing game. He doesn't possess top-end speed, but he does have really good hands. I think that he could be a really good possession receiver for this team this season. We already know about Michael Meyer. He's either the best tight end in college football, in your opinion, or the second best behind Brock Bauer at UGA. He's going to end up being a potential first-round draft pick whenever he enters the NFL draft. And this offensive line is phenomenal. I mean, they have several guys on this offensive line, at least 2 or 3, who are expected to end up being drafted really high come the 2023 NFL draft. And for Marcus Freeman, you know, I think that he is getting a really good team. And we already know how good he is when it comes to the defensive side of the football. This defense is going to be one of the best units in all of college football, especially when you look at this defensive line. This is one of the best defensive lines in America. I mean, you have Mills coming off a 3-sack season. You also have Jason, who had 5.5 sacks last year. Isaiah Folksy had 11 sacks, one of the best pass rushers in America. And then you have a pretty good group at linebacker. Jonathan Bertrand, Jack Kaiser. Bertrand led the team in tackles last season. Cam Hart is going to be really good at cornerback for you this year. You have a really good group of safeties led by Northwestern transfer Brandon Joseph. For Marcus Freeman, he has one of the best Notre Dame teams that we've seen on paper in a very long time. And remember, Brian Kelly last year said several times that Notre Dame was ahead of schedule. Notre Dame was not supposed to be as good as what they were last year. Notre Dame was supposed to be rebuilding or retooling. At least we thought. And they were really good. Really good. They lost in the Fiesta Bowl to Oklahoma State. Really exciting game. So for Marcus Freeman, he has a really great team, but he also has a lot of pressure to perform. And out of all of the new head coaches in college football this season, he has the most pressure out of all of them. Because this pretty much, in my opinion, is a top 7 team from a talent perspective. It's all there for Notre Dame to be able to make a run at the college football playoffs. And I was recently listening to an episode of Colin Cowherd's podcast that he has on his podcasting platform, The Volume. And him and Joe Klatt were on, and they were discussing college football conference realignment. And they were talking about the potential of Notre Dame joining the Big Ten. And Colin Cowherd said that this is the best Notre Dame team that he has seen in over the last 25 years. And Joel Klatt even said that Notre Dame is pretty good. So their over-under win total this year is at 9.5. And that's not a mistake, people. You see, I think that Notre Dame is the most overhated program in college football. You know, a lot of people view Notre Dame to be overrated, but I think that they're underrated. And I don't really like referring to the majority of college football fans as casuals, but I feel that if you view Notre Dame as an overrated program, I kind of got to view you as a casual. This is a program that's been to the college football playoffs several times. They've been to a BCS national championship game all in the last decade. And even though they didn't win any championships or they didn't win a game in the playoffs, you still can't discredit them for getting there. You get what I'm saying? So you have to give them props for that. Because Notre Dame is one of those teams that everybody kind of just scuffs over and looks off. And then when they finally get into the conversation, they just want to use they're never competitive JT. You still have to give them credit. Because there are a lot of schools who would love to have the resume that Notre Dame has had over the last decade. And when you look at this schedule, I mean, you play Ohio State to start week 1. It doesn't get any bigger than that. Marcus Freeman's first official regular season game as the head coach of the Fighting Irish. Listen, I think that this is going to be a phenomenal matchup. I am going to take Ohio State to win that game because even though Notre Dame is a really talented football team, Ohio State is better. I think that Alabama and Ohio State are the two best teams in college football this year. You look at Ohio State, how are they going to match up against this Notre Dame defensive line? Notre Dame has a lot of talent on the defensive line, a lot of depth. But Ohio State has a lot of talent in their own right when it comes to the offensive line. They have a lot of people on that offensive line who are most likely going to be playing on Sundays sooner rather than later. Then after that, your schedule gets pretty easy for the next 3 games. You got Marshall, Cal. You should be able to take care of both of those 2 opponents. You got UNC on the road. We don't really know what UNC is going to be, but I think Notre Dame should be able to handle business. So before you play BYU, you should end up going into your bye week at 3-1. Then you play BYU in Las Vegas. That's going to be an entertaining matchup. I think that there is a small chance for an upset there, but I still think Notre Dame should be able to win that game. And I don't really think that Notre Dame is going to have any games that you really can look at and say that they have a chance of not being a favorite in until they play Clemson. And I do think that they can beat Clemson this year. So I think that Notre Dame should at least have 1 or 2 losses this season. And I think that they're able to beat USC as well. So maybe 1 loss. So I think that they're going to be at 10, 11 wins this year prior to bowl season. I think that this is one of the best teams in all of college football. And I think that they're really underrated. Really underrated. Like I said, a lot of people are stuck on this narrative about Notre Dame and what they've done in the past. But this is a really talented football team. And you got to remember that they were not supposed to be as good as what they were in 2021. They were ahead of schedule. And even Joel Klatt said that he was surprised that Brian Kelly dipped for LSU. Even though he was offered a lot of money, this is a Notre Dame football program that pretty much within the span of 2, maybe 3 years could end up winning a national championship if Marcus Freeman keeps up recruiting at the rate that he has been so far. So if you are somebody who's not high on Notre Dame football and it's because of one of those stupid past narratives that people keep using against Notre Dame, listen, this is going to be a really talented football team. I'm trying to tell you this. And if you bet against Notre Dame this year and one of these Clemson or Ohio State matchups, you might end up getting burned. I'm not saying that they're going to beat Ohio State. I just told you guys that I think Ohio State is going to win. But if you think that these are going to be games that Notre Dame's going to go in and they're going to get blown out like how they have been the last couple of times they've appeared in the college football playoffs, I think you're going to be wrong. I'll be extremely surprised if Notre Dame isn't able to keep that Ohio State game at least competitive until the last remaining minutes in the fourth quarter. I would be surprised if that Notre Dame Ohio State game doesn't end up being, decided by 1 possession. Same thing with Clemson. Even though I believe that they can beat Clemson, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up losing that matchup by at least one possession. I don't really think that there's going to be any games this year that Notre Dame is going to lose by more than a possession. Okay, I think that this team is that good. This is a top 7 team, talent-wise, in college football this year. And I think that a lot of people are overlooking Notre Dame. This is an extremely talented team. And there are a lot of diehard Notre Dame fans who feel the same way that Colin Cowherd and Joe Klatt do about this team this year. You do have some uncertainty about Marcus Freeman. Just how good of a head coach is he going to be? Clock management, in-game adjustments, that kind of stuff. But, I mean, this is a really talented team. And even if you're not a great head coach, talent in this sport takes you a long way. It's not the NFL. You can get carried by having a good team until you face other good teams with great coaches. So I think that the floor for Notre Dame this year, to me, is 9 wins. And the ceiling, undefeated. But I'm going to go with 10-1, 11-1. I can't remember how many games they play, but I think they're going to go 10-1 this year. At worst, I think they have 2 losses. But you guys let me know how you guys feel about Notre Dame football this upcoming college football season. Do you guys feel that this is the best Notre Dame team in the last 25 years?